When it comes to things that put me in a spooky mood, I'll be honest, I never really thought it would be Ennio Morricone. Happy Halloween, everybody! It's been a while since I made a dedicated holiday video. I got completely derailed last year thanks to a mid-2000s Xbox FPS game. So why not take a break from that and play another mid-2000s Xbox FPS game with Darkwatch. Yeah! Released in 2005 for Xbox and PS2, Darkwatch was a console horror-flavored action FPS. It was also the debut game of Highmoon Studios, a project they had been working on since they were an internal developer within the Sammy Corporation. They eventually split off from the larger company and formed into their new studio, whose name still exists today, in some capacity. If I could summarize this game in a few words, it would be Clint Eastwood Gothic. Take the setting of a classic western, and then add ghosts, ghouls, vampires, dark creepy tombs, and graveyards cast in the light of a full moon, as well as a bit of steampunk thrown in there for good measure. It was a fairly ambitious little title for its developer. Not a huge release, especially compared to those coming out around the exact same year, but it was still a fun little shooter. Score-wise, it got somewhat middling reviews. Not bad by any means, but a lot of 7 out of 10s, even the occasional 6 and 5. Kind of in the same range as something like Pariah or Fire Warrior. Not the best mark of quality for a console shooter. But over the years, it's become quite a cult classic, and I'm hard-pressed to find anyone who openly dislikes it. So I always wanted to try this game out. I loved Highmoon's Transformer games, but how was their first title? Does it hold up? Or is it just a dated 6th gen memory? Well, let's jump right in. For starters, there's the question of how to actually play the game. Play it on PS2, play it on Xbox, or emulate it. They all come with their pros and cons. On PS2, the game is locked to 30, while on Xbox, it can be run at 60, with a slightly wider aspect ratio. So it sounds like Xbox is the definitive winner, right? After all, this is how I first played the game. Yeah, for those who've never worked with 6th gen consoles, even with my very nice HDMI converter, your color range is going to be severely limited for a lot of these games. Darkwatch seems especially bad, and it feels like the contrast or brightness is off. Like, I don't know, I've tried messing with it, but I think the game is just stuck like this. Doesn't surprise me. A lot of ports for the OG Xbox were like this back in the day. Even though it was technically a more powerful console, developers usually developed games primarily for the PS2, and then ports for the Xbox would come later. That's what this one feels like. It's a shame too, because this game can look stunning once you actually see the color. PCSX2. Let's get that PS2 port working in HD. Through emulation, we can get this running in widescreen and in 60 FPS. Perfect. It's 1876 in the Arizona Territory, where we get to play as the outlaw Jericho Cross, which I must say is real unfortunate nominative determinism. He's an eye patch wearing Civil War vet who's taken up a life of crime, and tonight he decides to try robbing the wrong train. He runs into Darkwatch, a mysterious ancient order tasked with fighting supernatural beings.
You got no clue what you're into. There's no gold in that vault. Oh, to hell with it. No!
And this particular train is carrying a nasty piece of work. An ancient vampire, Lazarus. When he gets on board, Jericho creates a mess of the whole thing. Ghouls start climbing out of nowhere, although Jericho doesn't seem to be too surprised by any of this. He sees this undead supernatural creature and he immediately starts blasting. Guys were built different back then. Well, after his failed train heist, Jericho runs into a Darkwatch agent, and the two of them together try to take down Count Chocula, only to end up with Jericho being bitten. Lazarus takes off, and ghouls, zombies, and ghosts start taking over the frontier, and Jericho is thrust into a Wild West adventure as he begins to transform into a vampire. That's the premise. The game creates a blend of wild western tropes mixed with dark, gothic, and steampunk visuals. The game's story is basically that of a classic spaghetti western. A nomadic outsider wanders into a conflict, gets in over his head, and ultimately seeks revenge. just with more screaming witches and undead zombies. The game had a lot of influences. Blade, Men in Black, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, Raiders of the Lost Ark, even Army of Darkness. It was also pretty obviously inspired by every FPS game under the sun. Half-Life, Medal of Honor, Time Splitters, and yeah, the one that we're kind of skirting around. I played this opening a lot. The early levels are there to establish how the game handles, as well as some of the weird mechanics. Jericho is now cursed as a vampire, so he's not a normal FPS protagonist. He has supernatural abilities. He can feast off the souls of his slain enemies to either heal up or level up. We'll talk about that in just a sec. As luck would have it, Jericho is helped by a blonde vampire hunter, Cassidy Sharp, voiced by Jennifer Hale. Because we fucked up so badly and unleashed what may as well be Satan, we're now tasked by her to help stop Lazarus. She helps us along in the first mission, where we get to stop at a gorgeous looking church. Yeah, it was this moment in the game that made me realize that I had to emulate it, because playing it on console just wouldn't do it any justice. And the atmosphere is just perfect. I'm having to shoot undead cowboys and Indians as they climb out of their graves, leading us into an underground labyrinth of catacombs. This is also a good showcase of how the levels vary in terms of playstyle. Sometimes it's close quarters, other times it gives you more space to move around and breathe in. Pacing also feels pretty good here. As soon as these catacombs become too repetitive, we're back up on the surface. And yeah, we get another really stunning area. Yeah, check out that tree. Have you ever seen a tree this evil before? Yeah, so far, every location here has been begging to be made into a screenshot. I'm glad I saved this game for Halloween. The combat is also really coming into its own. Guns feel weighty, and there's a good impact to them. Plus, enemies are just really fun to fight, especially when you can blow their limbs and heads off. I'll get more into that when I talk about combat, but so far, the game is leaving a good impression on me. But then, what comes right out of nowhere is that Cassidy gets fucking killed.
The cross burns you because you are weak. You have been chosen. In time, you will know why. Until then, you suffer.
Yeah, this shocked me as well. I thought the sexy leather-clad companion would sort of get to stay with the main protagonist. But no, she's taken out immediately within like the first hour. The way her body just kind of gets thrown down is pretty funny though. Huh, I can choose what to do here. Nah, I'm a goody two-shoes. This is a recurring mechanic in Darkwatch. Moral choices. A lot of the time you come across lost souls who can either be released or stolen. You can use this to either gain good powers or evil powers, both of which have their respective skill trees. So the game is constantly giving you this dilemma, either free souls or harvest them. Well, turns out Cassidy is still with us in spirit. Only now she's just stuck as a blue ghost lady who talks to us in our head. And she is in no way similar to another character from that other game. Even though she's dead, she still wants us to take down Lazarus. She has to complete her mission. I kind of like Jericho's reaction to this. Like, you can tell that he doesn't really know what's going on, and he kind of just wants to go back to being a petty train robber again. But now he has a blue ghost GF who's forcing him to become the savior of the West, or whatever. Now, I want to take a sec here to highlight why I decided to emulate this game. Darkwatch was a 2005 console shooter for the Xbox and PS2. This was a late 6th gen title. This came out just a few months before the 360 launched, so it's in a weird middle ground in terms of graphics. I think Darkwatch really excels in terms of atmosphere, and the art team is doing a lot to elevate these simple environments. Like, I'll give you an example. This arena is basically just a giant open field, and yet it's got tons of little details that makes it memorable. You've got the moon the size of Jupiter, silhouetting the most evil, sinister looking tree straight out of Evil Dead. You're not walking through a simple linear hallway. You're walking through a metal-clad train designed to look like a Marilyn Manson concert, swaying and shaking as it goes over a bumpy rail. You aren't clearing out enemies through chest-high cover wall. You're shooting guys in a cemetery in the backdrop of a giant abandoned church. In this regard, I think the presentation does a lot to carry this game's otherwise simple design. Every environment in this game is memorable, just because of how some artist was able to add their own flair to it. Simple things like certain lighting choices or certain color combinations. Each level gets a unique mood thanks to it. Nothing here feels bland or forgettable. In fact, graphics aside, I think it all looks pretty great. The artists and designers here took the premise of a steampunk horror Wild Western shooter and are running wild with it. You've got super stylized, exaggerated visuals that feel ripped straight out of a comic book cover. Sure, there's plenty of areas that do feel dated. Your flatly lit room or your boxy canyon that doesn't have too much detail. But for the most part, this game just looks nice. It's got good color choices and a good attention to detail. Another neat touch is that since Jericho is a vampire, most of the levels are set either at night or in a cloudy, overcast lighting. So you don't quite get the bright blue sunny skies that you would expect for a Western. You instead get sickly, overcast yellow haze at most. There isn't a single area in this game that does not scream Halloween. Weapons are amazingly detailed. I love the use of blacks and silvers to create these 1800s steampunk weapons. I also think that character and enemy models were really well done for the time, because one notable thing about them is how stylized the game took its characters. I think it fits. Jericho, the main character, has a chin that can put Kirk Douglas to shame. His design definitely invokes the cool vampire meets cowboy aesthetic. His hat covers most of his face and gives him an almost Lee Van Cleef sinisterness. And his black attire and trench coat gives off a kind of late 90s, early 2000s edge, like maybe Blade or Neo or JC. I like how he looks, and he really sells the balance between a rogue cowboy with a heart of gold versus a sinister outlaw with a side of darkness. I'm also glad the art team at Highmoon spent time refining his look, because had they gone with their original concept art, then we could have been stuck with this goober, steampunk Woody from Toy Story. And these enemy designs too, because to talk about the enemies, we have to get into combat and gunplay. Well, what can I say? It's pretty good. Throughout the 6th gen, console FPSs were given a huge push, thanks to a certain game who I'm struggling to not mention. This is definitely a weird era where a lot of games were trying to capture on that fever. Darkwatch was kind of similar. Its control scheme is still pretty modern, so the game controls very well. So we're a vampire, and we have guns. What now? Well, for starters, we get a few abilities. The first thing we get as a vampire is a blood shield. Yeah, it's your standard regenerative video game shield. Nothing out of the ordinary so far. Being a vampire gives you a lot more movement. It's easier to jump to high ledges, it's easier to platform. It is important to note though, when you're exposed to sunlight, you no longer have those abilities. And you don't even have your shield. But as a vampire, Jericho has access to a whole skill tree full of abilities. These powers are unlocked throughout the game by interacting with certain people or objects. This involves helping wounded people or by interacting with these weird totems. You can either free them for good guy powers, or you can consume them and kill them. Then you get XP for your bad guy powers. I shouldn't really say XP in this game either, as you only really progress through these one-off scripted interactions. I was a basic bitch. I chose the good powers. The first one you get is Silver Bullet, which enhances your weapon damage and briefly gives you infinite ammo. I found it to be really helpful, and even to the late game, I was still using this ability. And it recharges whenever you collect souls from killed enemies. And I feel this is where these abilities work in tandem with gunplay. I gotta say it, the guns feel great to use. There aren't a lot of weapons, and what you get is pretty standard for a Wild West game. Revolvers, a shotgun, a repeater, and a sniper. You also get dual wieldable pistols, an explosive crossbow, and a rocket launcher. And of course, instead of grenades, you have dynamite. I will say, I love how the enemies immediately start freaking out once you toss a dynamite stick at them. Now, I wouldn't call the weapon lineup the most unique, but it gets by on its weapon designs alone. Yeah, look at these. All these elaborate designs. These are guns made for a secret, ancient religious order. There's all kinds of wonderful little touches, crucifixes being embedded into the iron sights. You'll also notice how a lot of these guns have blades on their stocks. When an enemy gets too close, you can just melee and cut off their limbs. The Redeemer is your main gun, and it's a good pistol. It's a Wild Western revolver that looks like it was designed by Hot Topic. It's really useful to rapid fire it too. It's the most common gun in the game, so it's the one you're going to have the most ammo for. The carbine will be the next gun that you pick up. Just an all-round good medium-range weapon with satisfying headshot potential. I love the shotgun. Sadly, the game does limit how much ammo you can get for it, so you do have to conserve it. but it's really satisfying to use. I love my video game shotguns, and this is up there. Doubly so since you have a built-in Klingon batleth into the stock, perfect for close encounters. The crossbow is clearly a gun they came up with on paper, and in practice, it's kind of hilarious. You fire explosive arrows at people and watch as they run around before they explode. It's a gimmick weapon. You're given it a few times throughout the game, and you can turn enemies into walking time bombs. It's really there to cause chaos, and if you try and use it strategically, you're in for a bad time. Remember, those explosive bolts can kill you too. You also have a Half-Life style rocket launcher that tracks your reticle. Not exactly sure how this thing works technologically for the era, but it's a decent power weapon. There's a scoped sniper rifle, as well as this scepter that you get very briefly, which lets you clobber the undead. Lastly, the game will also sometimes give you dual pistols, akimbo style. But this is registered as a completely different weapon from a single Redeemer pistol. You can't just pick up two of them off the ground. You have to find this exact pair of double pistols. It is fun though, and in a weird way, it's sort of the one rapid fire gun that the game gives you. Because there's no automatics here. This is the 1800s. We don't have portable machine guns. We do have chain guns though. Yeah, if you couldn't tell, that is a crucifix for the iron sight. The game has a 2-weapon limit, so you've got to discard certain fun gimmick guns in favor of ones that are more reliable, which does become a bit of an issue in the late game. You'll typically find the guns that you get the most ammo for on a certain level, and that's exactly what you're sticking with. For most of the game, it was pistol and shotgun for me. In fact, mostly just pistol for a lot of the levels. Ammo gets to be a real problem on higher difficulties. Despite that, I find the combat to be extremely enjoyable. I think I went into this game expecting generic by-the-numbers combat. There's a lot of those lower-budget, mid-2000s console shooters where combat feels very stiff and unfun. But that's not the case with Darkwatch. Combat feels really weighty and satisfying. It's amazing to tear apart enemies, watching as you can blow off their limbs, destroy them through explosives, or just start swiping at them with the blade that's embedded into your gun. And that's the one thing I remember the most from this game, is just how fun the combat gets. Guns are impactful, enemies are unique and fun to look at and fight, and levels are decent, but they're probably the more dated thing from this game. It's not bad, just emblematic of when it came out. If I had to sum up the levels for Darkwatch, I would say that it's peak 6th gen console corridor shooter. Better than most, but in terms of level design, it's got a lot of claustrophobic pathways that lead into locked off arena sections. Areas where you're dropped into a room or a combat section, and then waves of enemies spawn in. And these enemy spawners are common. They endlessly spawn more enemies until you destroy them, usually through grenades or maybe a power weapon. Now, these are spaced out, so the game is a good blend of these large arenas mixed with linear corridor shooting. So most of the levels don't drag on with a super long defense section. And yeah, that level design is fairly basic. Hallways are tight, arenas are usually flat, with some notable exceptions. The game likes to put you into a fairly manageable environment, throw some power weapons and ammo at you, and then spawn in multiple waves of enemies. And yeah, that's the core of the level design. A mix and blend of those linear, claustrophobic corridor shooters, which is to be expected. There were a lot of these on the Xbox and PS2. But it's blended with some really nice large open areas, where the game really turns into a fun horde shooter. Countless zombies charging you in an open field can be a lot of fun, especially when the game gives you plenty of fun weapons to use against them. And I do enjoy the variety on offer here. Some of the corridor wandering can blend together, but a lot of these big arenas feel very distinct and memorable. It's basic level design. Give an arena a unique gimmick, like a special gun that you can use, or add some interesting level geometry, and it becomes memorable. Overall, I didn't find anything wrong with the pacing in this game. Just a few levels near the end that I felt dragged on just a little bit too long. There are a few parts of this game, however, where those enemy spawners are a pain to deal with. On higher difficulty, there's straight up moments where you enter a Sisyphusian struggle as you're constantly pushing back and forth just to even get sight of the spawner, to the point where you're unable to bounce back. There's also quite a few horse sequences, letting you shoot at enemy horse riders, racing against trains, and then, weirdly enough, there's a sequence where you drive a steampunk armored car that totally isn't influenced by another console FPS game. Don't worry, we'll get into that. The game knows how to mix things up. And I will say that when it throws a gimmick at you, it doesn't linger on it for too long. It gives you just enough time to get used to what you're playing, but then it switches to something else before you get too bored, which I respect. It keeps you hooked. And even if one particular level might be a miss, there's always the next one. So yeah, level design here, it's standard console shooter affair. It's just thanks to the amount of variety, as well as the presentation, that these levels hold up more than they should. Now let's talk more about that presentation, because I really think this is the glue that's holding this entire game together. Voice acting across the board is very good. A lot of voice actor staples here. Jennifer Hale plays Cassidy Sharp, longtime voice actor Michael Bell is General Cartwright. Lazarus's voice actor was bothering me the most. I swear I had heard his voice before. So I looked it up, and, well, I think this video might now be cursed. On the topic of audio presentation, I need to talk about the real star of the show, the sound design. Guns all have a weighty bass to them. The starter pistol sounds like a goddamn cannon. Carbines and shotguns sound heavy. Explosions are intense. I would go so far as to say that something like the crossbow is only fun thanks to the audio design. Because you don't just hear the sizzling of the dynamite, you hear the enemy running around screaming as he's about to blow up. It's a little hard to hear through PS2 emulation, but let me just say, I've played this on my original Xbox while it was hooked up to a proper sound system. And for a game that's all about demons and vampires, it sounds heavenly. Enemies are all voiced and mixed really well. They scream, they groan, they shout at you. You can knock off enemies' arms and heads, and they will all react differently depending on what you hit. If you shoot off an arm, they'll literally back up, stumble, and even scream. If you shoot their other arm off, well, they can no longer attack you anymore, so they just kind of give up and die. Witches, on the other hand, will actually change their behavior, because they're able to scream out their projectile attacks. And so taking away their limbs will make them go crazy, and they turn the game into a bullet hell. Highmoon has a habit of adding in these silly little touches, which I appreciate. And like I've said, the enemy designs are really fun. And the game embraces all of those stereotypes as well, westerns and horror. I feel like I've spent the entire video praising this game's art team, but it really needs to be said. The game's art style is perfect. Highmoon knew what they wanted. A Wild West gothic steampunk first-person shooter vampire game. And they squeezed out every possible drop they could from that concept. In the environments, the enemies, even the story. And I'd say it all comes together in the game's solid single-player campaign. Where we left off, it's now just Jericho and the ghost of Cassidy. And after an obligatory mineshaft level, we climb out into the Sierra Entertainment logo. Apparently, this is the remains of an old Darkwatch facility that didn't fare too well against the forces of evil. Looks like they were doing some questionable experiments. Even Cassidy seems shocked by this.
These look like experiments of some kind.
Her goal seems to be getting us to the Darkwatch Citadel, where they will hopefully let us assist them in taking down Lazarus before he truly unleashes the apocalypse. It's a short horse ride to home base, only we get snuck up upon by yet another infested Darkwatch train. Yeah, okay, by this point in the game, I'm already learning some things about this organization. For a self-described secret order dedicated to fighting demons, they're doing a pretty bad job at it. Cassidy still wants us to help fulfill her mission, so I guess we're kind of obligated to do that. And this is where we finally arrive at the Citadel, meeting the Order themselves, Darkwatch. This next level is also a good example of why I'm hesitant to trust these guys. Brigadier General Cartwright. He's the leader of this Citadel, who openly treats Jericho like a prisoner, accusing him of being the cause of Cassidy's death and forcing him to go through a series of endurance trials in a literal torture maze. So far, I'm not getting the impression that these are the true good guys. Better than Lazarus and his army of ghouls, sure, but a secret organization housed in an evil-looking base full of skulls and torture mazes, with human prisoners, by the way, this doesn't scream good guy to me. And man, Cartwright hates me, which I guess is fair. We're a bandit who accidentally got tied up in all of this, and Lazarus escaping is kind of our fault. But at this point, either just kick Jericho out or kill him. This stringing him along only to reluctantly give him a Darkwatch badge feels very passive-aggressive. Who cares? We got our participation trophy.
Giddy up, cowboy. My name's Tala. Let's mount up.
Okay, word of advice to guys out there. If a woman ever approaches you like this, I'm not going to say outright avoid her, but at least be wary. Jericho's officially recruited, and it's time to hunt down Lazarus and his whereabouts. Also, I love Tala's walk here.
Man, I love it when she leaves, just to watch her walk away.
We're back to another mineshaft level. The whole area is a boxed-in canyon full of various tunnels and mining equipment. Lots of vertical ledges and platforms, which makes great use of your double jump. I'm kind of impressed by how big these open arena sections are. A nice change of pace from the cramped sewers we were stuck in earlier. And yeah, the combat is not letting up. There are civilians running around, so you have to be careful not to accidentally shotgun dudes in the middle of a gunfight. Once we cleanse the area, we return to base. It's been established multiple times that this organization travel on heavily armored war trains. Yet here, the game shows that they also travel via portals and teleportation, all from a giant Stargate in their home base. Why even bother with the war trains? Whatever. The next 3 missions we can play in any order we want. One is a vehicle mission, one is a mission set during the day where we have to recover an artifact, and the other is a mission at night where we have to defend a town against an invasion. It's an interesting idea, but it literally only shows up this one time during the game. We're also able to choose our weapon loadouts, either dual pistols, carbine, or shotgun. It only determines what weapon you spawn with. The vehicle section did surprise me. Horseback is one thing, but an entire level dedicated to driving a weaponized armored vehicle around a haunted town is a bit of a tone shift. And do you know what else it is? Not good. Yeah, the controls are just weird. The actual driving itself is perfectly serviceable, and the vehicle physics are okay. However, the actual combat part of this vehicular combat requires you to aim with this awful turret. It's got incredibly low sensitivity, and it also controls which direction you're steering. They aren't independent from each other. And to pile it on even further, this level shouldn't really be a driving section. The mission objective has you drive a short distance into a town. Then you spend the entire rest of the level driving around in circles as enemies endlessly spawn in. Mostly suicide bombers, by the way. The easiest way to deal with this level is to just park into a corner and shoot at all the enemies as they run towards you. I'm serious, the only real driving you do is this little section right here. And there's no other vehicle section in the whole game. You never get access to this car again. It's only used here, in what's arguably the worst level in the game. What? I have some theories, but my first instinct as to why this level exists is probably that elephant-sized console shooter in the room. There's no getting around it. Halo really took the air out of the room in regards to console shooters. When it launched, it had so many features that other shooters were just lacking at the time. And in the context of this game, it was a very well done implementation of vehicle physics. After Halo, there were a lot of envious console developers who saw that campaign and thought, hey, let's try our hand at vehicle sections, failing to realize that they didn't have the technical talent or design skills that Bungie did. In a weird way, Halo kind of developed from a vehicle combat simulator first into a first-person shooter. It wasn't a first-person shooter that then had vehicle physics thrown onto it, if that makes sense. But a lot of other console shooters didn't really realize that. They thought that if they wanted to compete with Halo, they had to have their own version of the Warthog. Problem was, none of them were able to pull off what Bungie was able to do. So I have a hunch that Darkwatch was in the same boat. My personal theory is that maybe Highmoon realized that this car combat sequence was just unfun after they had prototyped it, so they clearly decided to scrap any other level with it, making sure to save it for at least one small 10-minute section just so that they could put it on the back of the box. Look at us, we're just like Halo. Maybe I'm just too cynical, I don't know. These missions are pretty unremarkable. The next mission is at least interesting because it's set during the day, so you don't have your vampire abilities. A neat little change of pace. You move a little slower, you're not able to platform, and you're a lot weaker towards enemies. So you have to play this like an actual Western, which is kind of cool. It's forcing us to recover an artifact that Darkwatch were attempting to transport via wagon. A prism that lets vampires walk in daylight. Yeah, I bet Lazarus wants that. This again brings up my question of, if we have giant warp gates capable of instantaneous travel, why are we still bothering with horse-drawn carriages? After some more side missions, we're back to the linear campaign, where we gotta liberate a nearby settlement, Hangtown, which has been completely taken over by the undead. It's a complete mess. Yeah, it's so jam-packed with enemies that they're crawling back out of our own portals as we try and warp there. The town is swarming with monsters. Darkwatch forces are pouring in, trying to establish any kind of foothold, but the undead are relentless. I love this little sequence where we're held up in a saloon and we have to fend off waves of enemies. This is a slam dunk mission in terms of just level design as well as environment design. It's an incredibly dense city. This is not one of those sparse Wild West movie sets. It feels like a real town. It all feels lived in. And look at this friggin' church. Sitting at the top of a hill, overlooking the town, silhouetted by the moon, with a creepy, mysterious graveyard just beyond its gates. Bravo once again to the art team here for making this the best Halloween game ever.
Damn. Slaughtered. All of them. Right down to the choir boys. Cartwright ain't gonna like this. No one else needs to know what really happened here tonight.
Yeah, once again, I'm not sure how confident I feel about Darkwatch's ability to even tie their own shoes, much less avert a supernatural apocalypse. Also, come on, the game is really expecting us not to be suspicious about Tala. Hey Jericho, let me sneak away for a bit during the fighting. I'll be back once you take care of everything. Yeah, okay, like we're ever gonna trust her. Or I guess we do trust her. This whole time I was interpreting Jericho's permanent stupor as maybe him being in constant shock, maybe disbelief. But no, I'm starting to think that he is a legitimate simpleton. Well, Jericho can't keep his fucking pants on for 2 seconds and decides to pass his vampire powers to Tala, who then reveals herself to be in league with Lazarus. Wow, if only that wasn't obvious. She reopens the warp gate, letting undead swarm into the citadel. Yeah, nice going, Jericho. Guys, remember what I said about being wary of chicks like this. So now we're not just facing off against regular undead, but also undead Darkwatch members, alongside living Darkwatch members who are trying their best to help us. Keyword being trying. Yeah, I like how these guys are a lot more dangerous when they're dead than when they're alive. They just tear through my health like it's nothing, while my dumbass allies hang back in terror. Once again, reaffirming my belief that Darkwatch isn't actually an ancient paramilitary order, but rather a multi-level marketing scheme to sell leather and Hot Topic merch. I also feel like there was a missed opportunity here. I feel like the developer should have made the base more of a larger hub area. In-game, whenever you return here between missions, it's literally this room, this next room, and this stretch of hallway, then the portal room. I feel like the devs should have expanded it more and made it more of a recurring place that we constantly revisit, so that once it's finally attacked, it's a little more impactful. And if we've spent some time exploring the layout, that'll serve as advantageous for us later. This is also quite the complex. The Darkwatch base extends deep underground and even leads through various routes up to the surface, where outside there sits an extensive Pueblo village, which I assume to be abandoned, unless Darkwatch allows some random village to live right on their doorstep. This is where our boy Lazarus returns, and we get a boss fight. His attacks are pretty easy to dodge. He'll spawn in enemies for you to recharge your blood energy, then you can use your abilities to quickly kill him. I found using Silver Bullet to be really helpful here. Here's something that's a little interesting. Once we kill Lazarus, Jericho is presented with a real moral choice. Take Lazarus's curse, join Tala, and become the ruling vampire forever terrorizing the West. Or stop Tala, do as Cassidy says, and destroy the curse once and for all. And this isn't the end of the game either. Once you make your choice, you then have to play through a few more levels before you're able to achieve your goal, either good or evil. They are the same levels though, no matter what choice you make here, just with slightly different context. If you make the good choice, you're fighting through swarms of undead to stop Tala. If you make the bad choice, you're fighting through the remnants of Lazarus's decaying army, just to give yourself Lazarus's power. It's really only a change for the loading text and the cutscenes, as well as what the final boss will look like. They're identical levels. If we decide to destroy the curse, we have to stop Tala. So we have to clear out a Darkwatch train and take it to Deadfall. If we side with Tala, we still get the same mission. It's just that we're not working with Darkwatch anymore, and we're trying to take Lazarus's curse for ourselves. Already you can tell that the level designers might be reusing areas from prior missions. This entire section feels like a repeat from the beginning of the game, down to there being more horse combat. Then after that, you're navigating through the town of Deadfall, which feels identical to Hangtown. So I guess it's borrowing from Halo in more ways than one. Also, it may just be me, but this final stretch of the game really felt like a slog. What's left of the Darkwatch Order are going full World War I against this poor little town, and they're quite literally shelling it to hell. It's endless enemy spawners one after another. And yeah, after the beginning of this level, we really don't see any other Darkwatch agents. I think it's just Jericho left. Whatever, we find a portal that leads us into what I presume to be hell. Feels very Quake 1. This is the real end boss. It's different depending on which option you chose after the Lazarus fight. You're either fighting a giant goth vampire demon Tala, or a giant naked blue angel Cassidy. It's funny because I think they mostly have near identical attacks, just slightly tweaked and recolored. They're both multi-phase too, so throughout the battle these poor women you see here get sacrificed one by one, allowing them to get stronger and gain new powers. I get why Tala does this, because she's an evil bitch, but I'm still unsure about why Cassidy does this. Again, it's clear the developers wanted a more diverging narrative, but clearly only had time to quickly reskin the final boss. It's not too bad. The game constantly refills your ammo, so as long as you're able to dodge these attacks, you'll do fine. And yeah, depending on who you kill, you either save the West or you plunge it into darkness. So first, let's show off the bad ending.
This is just the beginning of the darkness we will bring.
I actually don't know if Tala thought her and Jericho could just rule together as some sort of vampire king and queen. Perhaps she was planning on being his concubine for a short while before betraying him. No matter the case, in the evil ending, Jericho wants the power for himself. Yeah, sorry Tala. Jericho becomes the new vampire lord, and presumably spends the rest of eternity terrorizing the West. And with the Darkwatch organization scattered and broken, who knows if he can ever be stopped. The end. It's kind of a weak ending, because there really was no enticement for Jericho, other than if the player wanted him to be a piece of shit. I wish the game gave him more incentive. Like, what if the curse was more alluring? Like, what if the story established that the curse wasn't an explicitly evil power, and if under the right mental fortitude, it could perhaps be used for good? Or at least contained. In Wrath of the Lich King, after Arthas was defeated, Bolvar became the new Lich King, just to contain the Scourge. Maybe Jericho could have been tempted to be the new vampire lord, if just to prevent the undead from ever attacking again. This could then lead to an ending where he gets corrupted by it, and ultimately falls to evil, same way Lazarus did. But that's the problem with this game. Jericho does not have the best sense of agency. He spends the entire game in an unchanged scowl. I don't know what he wants. I don't think the writers do either. But that's the evil ending, for all you edgelords who thought that you could get the vampire goth girl. Personally, I went with my blue, not Cortana angel wife, where we reject the curse and are set on destroying it. In this ending, we kill Tala.
I would have left you.
Yeah, no, I don't believe you in the slightest. With the world saved, we say goodbye to our naked blue ghost GF who turns into an angel and disappears. Damn, Jericho lost 2 sexy leather catsuit-clad GFs in the span of a couple days. Is there no end to this man's suffering? But with his vampire curse gone, Jericho is set off into the West, surely to embark on future adventures. Yeah, if only. That's Darkwatch. I've regularly heard it described as a cult classic, and I would dare say it approaches being an actual classic, if just barely. It was good. More than good. It was fun. And it was doing a lot to punch above its own weight in an increasingly crowded post-Halo console shooter paradigm. To me, Darkwatch always kind of felt like prime blockbuster rental material, which might sound dismissive, but we really don't get shooters or action games quite like this anymore, outside of no-budget indie titles. Those weird experimental shooters with short campaigns but really fun and engaging combat. The kind of game that you would rent for the weekend, but would end up remaining in your brain even years later. These little treats for the Xbox or the PS2 were common back in the day, and sadly, I don't think we really get them anymore, at least not in the same capacity. It was sandwiched between late 6th gen games and some of the super early 7th gen games that would launch with the 360 just months later. As you can imagine, Darkwatch never got its sequel. They had ambitions of turning Darkwatch into a franchise, not just with sequels, but with even a movie planned. This all fell through. Highmoon's ideas for sequels were also very bizarre. It was proposed that if they made any follow-up games, they would have made it an anthology series set across different time periods, like World War II or ancient Rome. As interesting as this sounds in a pitch meeting, I'm not exactly sure that removing your game's only unique aesthetic would have been that smart of an idea. I think Highmoon might have been looking at time splitters in regards to setting up a franchise. While I fully agree that taking it out of the Wild West for a sequel isn't a bad idea, I don't think you necessarily need to change the time periods. In fact, I think you can even keep Jericho as the main protagonist. Take Jericho out of the deserts of Arizona and throw him somewhere else. An Ancient Rome sequel is way too out there. Instead, how about set it in late 1800s Vatican City? Or hey, we're fighting vampires. Are you telling me that you're too good for a game set in 1800s Transylvania? What I'm saying is, don't get rid of the steampunk aesthetic. Just change the location. There's lots of different directions they could have taken this series, but alas, a sequel was never meant to be. Darkwatch kind of became Highmoon's jumping off point. After Darkwatch, they would make a mostly forgotten Bourne third-person shooter. But after that, they had an idea for a potential Transformers game. And after seeing their pitch, Hasbro gave it the green light. This is what gave us the War for Cybertron duology. Games that utilized varying levels of design and inspiration that can be traced all the way back to Darkwatch's arcadey combat. After Cybertron, as well as the mediocrity that was their Deadpool game, Highmoon has definitely had a rough lot. They're now basically used as a slave studio for Activision to work on Call of Duty, which is depressing. There's lots of companies that fell down that route. I think in my Halo Infinite video, I threw out the idea that Highmoon could probably make a better Halo game than 343. And playing Darkwatch, yeah, I still think that. Fun fact, this game has split-screen co-op, something that modern Halo doesn't even have anymore. With the benefit of hindsight and time, Darkwatch is undoubtedly a classic. It's got a unique aesthetic, it's still impressive if just artistically, and the combat is, quite frankly, still fun. It's got a lot going for it, and I definitely urge anyone sitting on the fence about Darkwatch to at least give it a try. Consider this as a nice little Halloween treat. That's the video. I hope you guys have a great Halloween. I'm going to be back with another horror game review. This one is going to take a while to finish up. You guys will see. Yet another video that's ballooned out of proportion. Otherwise, you guys take it easy. I'll see you next time.